Dear friends, colleagues, my name is Dietmar Merkes. On my left side, I have the pleasure to welcome Barbara Unmöslich, the president of the Heinrich Perl Foundation. And there is Jürgen Stoll, who will moderate the event. Our media partner today is the newspaper Tageblatt. Please let me give you some explanations on ASTM, Action Solidarité Tiers-Monde, and this evening. We are a young, dynamic Luxembourgian development NGO celebrating next year our 50th anniversary. We are cooperating with around 25 civil society organizations and grassroots movements in Latin America and Western Africa and Southern Asia, by supporting them financially and politically, exchanging experiences and learning from each other. What they tell us about life conditions and the daily struggle for survival of farmers, urban poor, and indigenous minorities constitute an important authentic source for our educational and political activities here in Luxembourg. As co-founder and coordinator of Climate Alliance Luxembourg, a municipality network in Luxembourg and also in Europe, which is engaged for the protection of climate, rainforests, and the rights of indigenous peoples, we have a long-standing experience in considering questions of global justice and environment in a coherent way. Again and again, our southern partner organizations are facing problems with transnational corporations violating human and environmental rights in their respective countries. How difficult it is for effective people to defend themselves can be seen day in, day out. Far too often they have to find out that being right does not automatically mean obtaining right. Meanwhile, transnational corporations are profiting from loopholes, enabling them to act out of the range of democratically legitimized jurisdictions. Recently, ASTM has therefore launched the campaign No Corporate Impunity, Human Rights Before Profit, which advocates for closing these loopholes. Dear audience, to give you a taste of our campaign, we'd like to show you right now a short 2-minute video.
Réglez d'abord les problèmes sur la Terre avant d'exploiter l'espace. Qu'en pensez-vous ? Chaque jour, les activités de nombreuses multinationales engendrent des violations des droits humains et détruisent l'environnement. L'exploration des ressources naturelles est à elle seule responsable de 28% des atteintes aux droits humains. Dans l'industrie textile, 60 millions de couturières travaillent dans des conditions dangereuses, gagnent des salaires de misère et sont réprimées si elles revendiquent leurs droits. Chaque année, les multinationales s'approprient des millions d'hectares de terre dans les pays en développement et chassent les communautés locales, les privant ainsi de leurs moyens de subsistance. Et si 80% des multinationales ont leur siège dans un pays développé, les victimes se trouvent majoritairement dans les pays en développement. Mais comment en est-on arrivé là ? Aujourd'hui, plus de 69% des économies les plus puissantes au monde sont des multinationales. Ce chiffre augmente ainsi que la pression que ces multinationales exercent sur les États. Rendre juridiquement responsable une multinationale pour les dommages qu'elle cause est devenu extrêmement difficile. Finalement, les multinationales n'ont que des droits, alors que nous, les citoyens, nous avons des droits et des devoirs. Ainsi, si dans un pays pauvre, la filiale d'une multinationale viole les droits humains, grâce à des structures extrêmement complexes, la société mère qui donne l'ordre arrive à échapper à sa responsabilité. Et les victimes doivent se battre pour obtenir justice. Et lorsque les hommes et femmes dans ces pays où les multinationales agissent en toute impunité tentent de défendre leurs droits, ils sont harcelés, menacés assassinés. Mais de plus en plus de citoyens souhaitent avoir accès à des produits et à des services propres, respectant droits humains et environnement. Il faut rétablir l'équilibre et obliger les multinationales à rendre des comptes des dommages qu'elles causent. Dans plusieurs pays européens et au niveau international, des initiatives ont été lancées pour doter les multinationales de devoirs. Pour que cela fonctionne, il faut que tous les États y participent. Action Solidarité Tiers-Monde appelle le Luxembourg à mettre en place des normes pour obliger les multinationales à prévenir les violations des droits humains et la destruction de l'environnement et à rendre des comptes en cas de dommages.
Our southern NGO partners are telling us very often, as mentioned in the video, how farmers and indigenous peoples are chased off their fields by land-grabbing corporations in order to make room for their plantations. With this topical effect, we are very happy that Barbara Unmüßig is here with us tonight, a profound analyst of the concentration of market power in the agri-food sector in the hands of transnational corporations. The moderation will be in the experienced hands of Jürgen Stolt, who is one of the editors and director of Luxembourg's monthly magazine Forum. He will give you an explanation about the flow of this evening and also some more details on Barbara Unmüßig. Jürgen, the floor is yours.
Barbara Unmüßig, who will explain us some of the aspects of this question, was born in Freiburg im Breisgau. She studied political science in Berlin. And in 1983, she already began political activism as editor of a paper which I know very well, and some of you might also know, Blätter des IZ3W, which is a periodical devoted to North-South politics. Then she worked as a research assistant for Green members in the German parliament. In the second half of the 1980s, she worked mainly for non-governmental organizations, and during the year 1992, she was the project director of the German environmental and development organizations at the Rio Conference. So already in 1992, she was a founding member of the Forum of Environment and Development, a German NGO, which is also quite known in the German green movement. Also in 1992, Barbara Unmüßig co-founded the World Economy, Ecology and Development Organization, WEED, which you might also know, where she worked until 2002 as executive chairperson. And from its beginnings on, Barbara Unmüßig has been involved in establishing the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, which is a political foundation close to the German Green Party. In May 2002, Barbara Unmüßig was elected president of the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, and since then she co-managed the foundation. The Heinrich Böll Stiftung focuses mainly on democracy support, globalization, human and women's rights, international climate policies, and agro-policies. And next to all this, and I have shortened a lot the CV of Madame Unmüßig. No, it's really impressive. It really is. So next to all this, she's also very much active on gender issues in a multitude of organizations, awards, and publications. Today, she will present us the findings of the Agro-Food Atlas on market concentration in the agro-food business, which is a cooperation of the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, and Friend of the Earth. So, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Stott. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, first of all, I very much would like to thank ASTM for the invitation. Very nice having such a big audience here, and I'm really looking forward to being able to present some of our facts, figures, and definitely some of the political context when we talk about everything under control, about the corporations that control what we eat. As you already mentioned, this Agri-Food Atlas, you can grab it outside here. And in Germany, our coalition who edited this was even much bigger. It was a bunch of people from the biggest environmental organizations to smaller organizations like German Watch and others, Oxfam Germany, who joined us in editing the German version and the German translation. And I think that coalition already shows us that there is a high and big interest in the issue. What is it all about when we call about power concentration in the food and food production area? I'm talking on corporations that control what we eat. And this is why, and this may to a certain extent come as a surprise to you, I'm speaking on how agriculture contributes and aggravates the global environmental crisis. I will refer to social issues as well, but I very much would like to come up with some main figures around the impact of agriculture on nature, on climate change, of loss of biodiversity. First of all, you may probably know the Stockholm Resilience Center. The Stockholm Resilience Center introduced to us the term and analysis of so-called planetary boundaries. This graph shows you where we already are on our best way to overstep several natural planetary boundaries. We overstepped these boundaries already in relation to biodiversity, to climate change, of course, to land system change. That's the term, land system change. This means how do we, while plugging savannas, for example, or when we are turning tropical forests into pastures, for example, for cattle. This is what is in except terms named land use system changes. And what we do as well, biochemical processes of phosphorus and nitrogen are already in our ecosphere and atmosphere. In the areas of ocean acidification, we are very close to overstep planetary boundaries. All of them are man-made and could mean that we have caused irreparable damage that will have severely detrimental effects on how inhabitable our planet will be in the future. Global agriculture, and this is not so much known to many people, global agriculture, especially industrial agriculture, is one of the main causes and drivers of these multiple environmental crises. The United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, said and came up with a study last year that our nutrition systems, the way how we produce our food, accounts for 60% of biodiversity loss. 60%. I don't know if you got to know here in Luxembourg a big study by some German scientists who clearly came up that we are facing a deep and tremendous and shocking loss of insects, for example, measured in our country very much so. You may know how our bees are dying, and this has much to do with the way how we produce our food in an industrial, agricultural manner. Agriculture is responsible for 13% of man-made greenhouse gas emissions that drive global warming. If we consider the changes in land use, plugging, for example, agriculture is responsible for an additional, for a whopping 30%. If we include land use changes and agriculture per se, then we have that 30% share how agriculture contributes to climate change. Agriculture is in that respect then the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. Second is energy with 25%. The top 20 meat and dairy corporations emit greenhouse gas emissions more than Germany. And the top 3 meat and dairy corporations emit more than Shell, Exxon, or BP. We have produced at the Heinrich Perl Foundation a fact sheet to make clear how responsible agriculture is for greenhouse gas emissions. And for us, it means that we definitely have to include the share of agriculture when it comes to the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And this is not the case yet so much, but we have to really make sure that agriculture and how to make agriculture more sustainable and more ecologically sound is then a task ahead. Yet, the sector seems to be immune to calls for meaningful reforms towards a more sustainable and equitable model. And politicians continue to shy away from implementing reforms and instead protect the old privileges of industrial agriculture and livestock farming. Look at our common EU agricultural policy, for example, or the recent debate, our glyphosate in Europe. The Heinrich Böll Foundation has not only produced the Agri-Food Atlas, but as well some other impacts of agriculture. We have the Soil Atlas, the Meat Atlas that shows how meat production mainly contributes to social and environmental consequences we are mostly not aware of when we eat too much meat, I would say. And of course, the Agri-Food Atlas, I refer to it tonight. You can get all these atlases for free from our website. So we are an organization that makes our publications available for everybody who likes to get it. A crucial factor that inhibits change and seems to make the agricultural industry immune to reform is the high concentration of power in the sector. So, what is the problem? There is an exceptionally high degree of power concentration across the whole production chain of meat and agricultural produce, from seeds over pesticides, machinery to consumer markets. All these sectors I just mentioned are controlled by only a handful of corporations. They control our food chain, they control what we eat, how it is produced and grown, and they control the quality of our food. I now want to share some of the facts and trends we have identified with some of the illustrations you will also find in the Agri-Food Atlas. Wherever we look along the chain of production in agriculture, we see bottlenecks. This graph, this map shows where the big players are based geographically. The market for agricultural technology, this is the tractors, the harvesting machines, etc. The market for agricultural technology is only controlled by 3 companies. Deere, you may know this name, CNH and HACCO. The turnover of these companies is even bigger than the turnovers of pesticides and fertilizer producers. This is something we are not aware of. The share, the worth of fortune is $120 billion. And these $120 billion, I repeat, are shared by 3 companies. I go further with my presenting the figures. the market for pesticides and seeds is yet still dominated by 7 companies that share 70% of the turnover between themselves. And the market for fertilizers, 3 control 21%. They not only sell the fertilizers, they operate their own mines and factories, for example, for phosphate, based, for example, in Tunisia or in Morocco or Mauritania. And the trend continues. The bigger, the better, the more powerful is the motto. Competition is driven out of the market by the big giants, by further industrializing and upscaling their production methods, thereby making them more profitable. Or, if all else fails, by buying up the competition, by swallowing them up into one even bigger corporation. That's definitely the trend we actually face. And another method is by combining different sectors into one big conglomerate. These companies do not just hold seed production, they will also invest in the machinery to sow them or pesticides and fertilizers to help them grow. A classic example, and I will refer to this graph up there, classic example is Monsanto's genetically modified seeds and Roundup, or the other name is glyphosate. These seeds are resistant to glyphosate because of a mutation. Monsanto is selling a profitable package deal. You may be aware of the announced merger of Bayer and Monsanto. This has got a lot of attention in European public. What you can see here in this graph is telling you that we are going up to have quite soon, not only, as I said before, 7 companies controlling the pesticide and seed markets, but we are going to have in the near future only 3 big companies. And this has to do because of not only the merger of Monsanto-Bayer, this is the biggest bar here, but very much so there are mergers already done or underway between DuPont and Dow Chemical and between a Chinese company, ChemChina, and Syngenta, the Swiss-based giant you probably may know. These mergers are going to control 60% of the markets for seeds and the market for pesticides as well. If all these mergers presented here are approved, an oligopoly will become monopoly in both sectors, in the seed sector as well in the pesticide sector. And this is real big money. 2015, Bayer and Monsanto together had a turnover of 25.5 billion US dollars. And the profit was about 5 billion US dollars. This is real big money. By 2025, the big 2 players, Monsanto and Bayer, they expect a global turnover from 85 to 125 billion US dollar. This is big business. No other company has bought up so many competitors in the seed market as Monsanto did in the past. They started in the 90s and now dominate a quarter of the global market, but rarely appears. They don't usually print their logo on packs of seeds sold in the European Union. So the consumer or the peasant really does not know so much that he is all the time buying the seeds and the fertilizers from Monsanto. Because here, this company has not real good rumor and this has not good representation. What does that matter? It matters because these big companies control how we grow, they control what we grow, and they control the conditions such as the trading system and definitely the working conditions of the people working in agriculture, in the trade sector, and in the retailer sector. 3 companies will dominate, as I said, 60% of the commercial seed market. They will supply almost 100% of genetically modified plants. And told, this is very important for the power game we are in, they will hold most of all, even 100% of the patents for the seed. Truly owning the source of our food. And this is something we want to make people aware of, that our food is becoming more and more under control of a handful of corporations. So, what seeds we have available across the world to grow our foods is in their hands. Whether it is treated with pesticides, how much it is sold to farmers, how much they turn over in the supermarket. These questions will be answered in the future by these companies and not debated and regulated democratically by the people it affects most, the farmers, the producers, the workers, and us, the consumers. We are losing control over something so essentially important as our global food supply. Bigger is not always better. Despite the claims by business representatives, more than 850 million people still go hungry in our world every day, and industrial agriculture has no answers for them. More pesticides, more genetically modified organism crops, and industrial livestock farming have not solved the problem, and I dare say never will. Maybe a topic for our discussion later on, because I have not enough time to refer to that aspect of argumentation given to us by these big companies. They always claim to say we need that kind of productivity, we need that kind of industrial agriculture to feed the people. I'm prepared for counter these arguments, but mainly and later for the debate. What does it mean being so big and powerful? It definitely comes at a price for the company themselves. Bayer, our chemical company in Germany, will have to acquire debt worth 57 billion US dollar to buy Monsanto. A risk they have calculated. They know their size and market share can minimize it. But success also depends on the success of their business model. And the business model, again, is genetically modified organism seeds and plants. And they are definitely very interested in that politics is not going to threaten that business model. And this is the graph that shows it. It's the interest, the big interest of these companies to influence legislation by lobbying politicians, for example. This graph shows that not just business, but agribusiness and food in particular were the most popular guests at the EU, while TTIP was negotiated in secrecy. You see this, how many companies lobbied in Brussels, and as I said, mainly from the agribusiness. There are two big problems here. The industry is not only promoting further trade agreements like TTIP, they also make sure that international trade is regulated in a manner compatible with their business model. With glyphosate, we are seeing something similar happening. It's not, definitely not, the precautionary principle, a very important environmental international principle agreed, for example, in 1992 at the Earth Summit. It's not the precautionary principle guiding politicians and their decision to regulate. It is business interest. Otherwise, the scientific science that glyphosate might be a carcinogenic substance would be enough to ban it if we are really follow the precautionary principle. Let me furthermore shed a light on supermarkets and, in that respect, to us, the consumers. The trend of power concentration is not limited to the production side of the food supply chain. In France, 6 stores share the market. In Germany, 4 supermarket chains control 80% of the market. A few years ago, we had 7 companies. Now it's only 4, like Rewe, Edeka, and so on. In Belgium, the leading 3 have 72 of the market. And please correct me if I'm informed correctly, Cactus in Luxembourg holds 50% of the market. I hope the source is sure. I just prepared for that. It's not a figure in the atlas, but I try to get a figure for Luxembourg as well. And please let me know what Cactus makes here in your country. Globally, you may know Walmart. Walmart is the biggest retailer. They take 6.1% of worldwide turnover. The map shows almost across Western Europe, the 5 biggest chains share between 50 to 80% of the market. And again, what this means is they can dictate prices and conditions. If you are a producer and don't supply to one of the biggest supermarkets, you cannot make it. And you have to be very, very cheap. So producers are forced into submission. Social and environmental criteria only come second or third after the profit margins of the supermarkets. Or dairy farmers, for example, in my country, have to sell their milk at a ridiculous low price of under 40 cents per liter, or they have the choice not to sell it at all. And what does it mean? A cow produces everyday milk, and they have to get it sold somehow, or they have to get rid of it. I just spoke to a farmer. What shall we do? Should we go on strike? What then I'm going to hell do with the milk? Should I throw it in the lake or in the ground? So the people have no counterpower anymore. Yeah, and so it's the supermarket who dictate the price for the producers. The number 1 criteria across the world for the decision on where to buy food is definitely price over quality, over health, and over origin. It's profits over rights, and it's profits over environmental standards. Labor rights violations are the rule in agriculture, not the exception. And workers attempt to organize and enforce their rights are often violently crushed. There are countless accounts of unionists being fired. Some are among our partner spectrum in our offices, for example, in India. In Guatemala, Coca-Cola fired its entire workforce of a factory in 2016 and moved production elsewhere. And after Heinz, this is our ketchup, you probably know Heinz, and after Heinz took over Kraft Foods, another ketchuper, it cut 7,400 jobs within 20 months, 20% of its workforce worldwide. Workers and suppliers are at the mercy of the corporations, and their power derives mainly from the size of the corporation. We, as consumers, assume that when we enter a supermarket, that there is a lot of choice. The aisles are packed full of product, full of choice. 50 different bars of chocolate, 20 different kinds of bottles of water, hundreds of beers. But if you look closer, we can see it is an illusion. Often two competing brands are actually owned by the same company, acquired over decades through mergers. But the illusion of choice and competition is kept alive for us. If you have a quick look at the map, you can see which well-known brands are actually owned by the same companies. For example, ice cream, Häagen-Dazs and Mövenpick are manufactured by Nestle. Or butters, different like Becel, Rama and Flora are all made by Unilever. You can get all these graphs. I think it's very informative for you from the Agri-Food Atlas. So if you want to really make a difference, you should look from where else you want to get your food if you don't want to support Nestle or Unilever or others. But it's probably then a difficulty to find for you others who are going to offer something you want, like Rama. We know how power concentrated the agricultural sector across the world is organized. Companies like Bayer and Monsanto are subject of the private eye and come under scrutiny. Everyone now knows what glyphosate is, what it has to do with biodiversity loss, and most people don't want it in their food. A whole industry that remains very much hidden from the public eye is the meat production. In the US, 85% of beef is produced just by 4 companies. In Canada, 90% is controlled by 2 companies. In Europe, it is 4 to 5 dominant players that control the largest chunk of the meat market. And if you want to have an idea how much business this means for the companies, look at this map. This is the number of animals produced across the world. It's millions of pigs and millions of chickens per year. You can see that the giant in VH group in China raises and slaughter and produce 48 million pigs. And the biggest food company in the world is the Brazilian GBS. They definitely produce a lot of cattle, but as well chicken. It's 3.5 billion chickens they produce. This is mass production. It's industrial production. Our meat atlas is going to give you figures what kind of, how many pigs we slaughter, we consume, and chickens worldwide we produce. I would like to take my last few minutes in getting you a clue, not only what are the next steps, but at the end, what can we do politically about it. Before I come to that point, I would like to give you some few more details what's going to happen in the future. This power concentration I presented to you will very much so help these companies to digitalize and to bring in new technologies into the agricultural industry. Computerized tractors, for example, that collect data on the quality of the soil they are working on, or programs that allow precision agriculture. With the help of data, the hope is to reduce the use of pesticides on fields by targeting where they are spread more effectively, or machines that can tell crops from weeds and remove the weeds automatically. They collect weather data and soil data to optimize the time of planting, harvest, distance between crops, etc. Many of the peasants I spoke to, even smallholders and even agriculture farmers, they are very interested in that precision agriculture. I only can briefly touch here. But what I want to make here, I'm not against precision agriculture, but what we have to be aware of, who can it afford to have technology? It's again the issue of power. Who can afford it? Is it the small ones that are able to, or is it the big ones? And what we definitely can see, it's the big agro industry that is investing in that kind of precision agriculture, and they are already under control, yeah, of what's going on in the whole food chain. And what we are going to come to see is definitely that the merging will take place when it comes to more digitalization of agriculture. As I said, gaining back control. This is the issue I just want to mention here. We know probably what must be done. Politicians must really tackle the problem. They must be aware how agriculture contributes to climate change, to loss of biodiversity. And definitely we need politics to strengthen competition laws, rules of investment to include social and environmental standards, and human rights would be a good place to start with. There is one big opportunity in the upcoming months and year. It's definitely the reform of the common agricultural policy of the European Union. The European Union spends 60 billion on agriculture annually. And this money very much favors the power concentration. It favors the big farmers and not so much the smallholders. And what we are asking for, and I hope the citizens here and the organization like ASTM in Luxembourg are joining us in our campaign, European-wide organized campaign, to really come up with a real EU reform of the agricultural policy. I think it's a real screw, it's a leverage we have as consumers to come up and speak up loudly that our agriculture really needs a complete change. We have to do much more on saving our soil, saving the environment, and we definitely have to do a lot to avoid the bad impacts and consequences our agricultural policy has. Because when we import the fodder from developing countries, like from Brazil, from Argentina, from Uruguay, we import soya to feed our animals, we definitely are co-responsible for the fact that smallholders are losing their soil, their land. A lot of land grabbing is taking place. You mentioned it before, because of that power concentration and that big demand of big companies for more land. I can explain the process later. And it's the EU policy that is relevant for what is going on elsewhere, because as well we export food, mainly chickens or even pigs, like parts pigs, to developing countries, and are destroying the local markets for small producers, for example. And all these things are coming together in a context where we definitely have to say no to that kind of power concentration in the agricultural sector. Food is something we really should care about, and we have to jointly come up with asking for not only for reforms, but for deep and tremendous changes in the way how our food is produced and sold. Thank you very much. I hope that was enough food for thought, and I'm ready to listen, get your questions.
Thank you, Barbara Unmusig. I would like to invite now Dietmar and Dietmar Mirkes and Antonia Argirova to come up here. We will have another half an hour, three-quarter of an hour of discussion. Antonia is in charge at ASTM of the campaign, which was presented before, and Dietmar is also coordinator of Climate Alliance Luxembourg. So these questions which were here mentioned are very much in your subject of work of every day. I noted a lot of questions, but what we would like to do first is open up, have a look what questions you have to the subject now we heard, and then later we will open it up a bit on the topic of your campaign of responsibility of the big corporation. We have here now a good example of what big corporations who are in part also in Luxembourg. We have a stock exchange here where we also have agricultural corporations. And this is a subject which with the example of agri-food can be developed further. So maybe first a few questions of understanding. Who would like to start? Who would like the questions also? The things we heard now.
Thank you very much. You showed us very clearly the dangers of companies merging together. But usually when we hear politicians speak about these mergings, they are usually very happy. So I cannot understand that. And also I see a danger in politics because, as an example, here in Luxembourg, the #1 politician of a party who was traditionally working for the working people is the main promoter here in Luxembourg for such things like TTIP and CETA. So how can we force these politicians who seem to be either naive or corrupted, how can we, yes, I'm sorry to say that, but it's what I feel, how can we force them to make laws for the people and for the environment? Thank you.
Ma question était de savoir, la fois passée, il y avait un fermier péruvien en Amérique du Sud qui avait assigné en justice une entreprise allemande. Parce que justement, une entreprise électrique allemande du nom de RWE, ça disant que l'entreprise allemande était responsable ici de réchauffement climatique, donc il y a eu aussi pour conséquence, il y a eu quand même des dommages dans son village. Bon, j'aimerais savoir sur quel fondement juridique, sur quelle base légale, le Péruvien qui est en Amérique du Sud a pu ici assigner en justice une entreprise allemande, dans la mesure où l'entreprise allemande n'a pas du tout aucune usine, disons au Pérou, Et bon, en fait, d'un point de vue juridique, je ne vois pas le lien. Je sais que oui, l'entreprise allemande en question fait partie ici quand même de l'un des grands pollueurs. Mais pourquoi ici le fermier péruvien n'a-t-il pas assigné en justice une entreprise, c'est pas canadienne, américaine, qui se trouve au moins dans les parages, que de venir jusqu'en Allemagne? Et pourquoi l'entreprise allemande? Pourquoi pas, c'est pas Danone ou bien une autre entreprise? Et sur quelle base légale, juridique à ce moment-là?
Pour moi, la question de la réforme de la PAC me paraît absolument fondamentale, dans le sens où ce que j'ai compris de l'essence de la PAC, c'était après-guerre, on a demandé aux agriculteurs de produire énormément de nourriture pour en fait réduire la part des ressources des ménages dans l'achat de nourriture. Autrement dit, pour pouvoir faciliter à côté la consommation d'autres biens et de services. Donc ça, c'est comme ça que j'ai compris, en tous les cas, l'origine de la PAC. Et donc, le choix de la réforme de la PAC et le choix dont parlait monsieur tout à l'heure des hommes politiques de valider encore ces hypothèses de production, est-ce que c'est pas tout simplement une question de choix de société de consommation? Voilà.
The actual question is related to dairy production. So what you mentioned in Germany is well, more or less the same case in France, that milk producers have to sell it to a ridiculous price. As far as I know, and I've seen something very recently in TV about that, is that the reason for the milk producers for their problems is the recent, or a few years ago, when the Commission abolished the milk limits or milk quotas. So, which seemed to me a pretty normal decision to have those limits, to have those quotas, to keep up a certain level of production in order to not have too much offer regarding the demand. So I would like to understand why the Commission or why Brussels accepted to abolish those quotas, knowing that this would cause problems, major problems for the milk producers and in the milk production overall. Thank you.
Good evening, Jean-Luc Karliskin, donc living in Luxembourg. There was a few words which were not pronounced in your presentation, which was, thank you very much, excellent. So we have to say that. And there was stock market, right? The rules of the stock market, you might have pronounced, and also capitalism, because at the end of the day, what rules? Gold rules, that's what the one said. Golden rule is gold rules. Because what has to do, it has not only to do with agriculture, in all industries the same. You take energy, you take automotives, you take banking, it's all the same. It's about making more money, more capital. That's the rule. And the politicians, they're only there as long as they're allowed to be there. Because also we know that big capital is owning the media. Big media is owned by big capital, and even in the US, and for instance, the big parties are now financed by corporations. So I mean, as long as we don't look at it from that angle, we will never look at anything. And I would just, when I was listening, why don't we remember what Karl Polanyi wrote in 1944, The Great Transformation, where he said that the market, the free market, destroys the environment on which it is based, not only on nature, but also on work. So this is the rule. So I mean, this was a bit missing at the end, to say where it is, and as long as we don't look at there, we will not look at anything regulating there, okay, but it's not going to help. I mean, and also globalization, as we said, those rules, which have been enforced for over the last 30 years, they are part of that. This is the problem. And then those corporations, they only follow a system. And all the people there, they follow a system. Even in a corporation, what can you do about it? Thank you. This was not mentioned.
Definitely. I didn't give a lecture on what capitalism means, yeah, and why capitalism, to a certain extent, from my perspective, definitely is one of the root causes why inequality exists, why we destroy the planet, definitely. One of the crucial ingredients is expansion. And if you probably recall my planetary boundary graph, the first one, definitely says, that's my perception, in a limited atmosphere and how do you ecosphere, you cannot expand endless, and our resources are limited. The capacity of the atmosphere to absorb is limited. Land is limited. Come back to the issue of the evening. Definitely, land is a limitation in this world. You cannot expand land anymore, only if you are really ready to destroy forests, ecosystems like savannas. And this is definitely something that is happening. And this is why I say we have to take into account the planetary boundaries and really be able to come with new ideas how about our way to produce and to consume, and name it as you like. I don't want to come into a debate of how to get rid of capitalism. I definitely know that we have to rethink our economy, and you can get there some ideas even from Mr. Marx, yeah, but you can again get a lot of ideas of other thinkers, and that's what we do at the foundation. We have a very nice book out there from a British scientist, economist. His name is Tim Jackson. That means, and the title of the book is Prosperity Without Growth, and this is what I'm in favor for. How can we come up with good living conditions, with equality, with how to create and really come up with human rights on a broader way, with dignity and prosperity, not defined as, for example, Monsanto does, but prosperity defined in a different way. And this book, for example, gives us a lot of good and new ideas, but we are not yet at a point where we have a new blueprint how to be able to stay within the planetary boundaries, to be able to come up with a equitable world, etc., etc. So we have to rethink, definitely, because I'm absolutely with you that way how we produce and consume, and it's that capitalist system. We cannot continue as we did. I would like to come to answer your very concrete question. Thank you very much. I think agriculture definitely is an area where you need regulation, and the quota system, very much milk quota system, for example, was very, very important. And what happened when the EU Commission gave up the quota system? That was too much regulation. That was not enough liberalization of the market. They gave up the quota. They didn't understand the mechanism that then the peasant is going to expand his stock, yeah? And then you are going to have too much milk. The promise, and this was false advice by the EU and by national governments like ours, the advice to the peasant was, if there is an overproduction, no problem, we export it. Because to export is meanwhile the big answer of our agricultural ministers. And what happened then, and that helped a lot again to bring the milk price under pressure, was with the what light, not the boycott, the sanctions against Russia completely stopped the exports, yeah, and so there was the quota was not there anymore. And the sanctions didn't help to get rid of the overproduction. And these things came together. And what our minister, for example, is going to tell the peasants, we have to overcome the sanctions. Okay? And not to rethink and go back to the quota system again, because it's so difficult to confess a false decision from a politician. So, but I think in the dairy producers in Germany, they organized themselves, they really try to speak up, they organized demonstrations, etc., etc. Then we had a milk price per liter of 29 euro cent. And they were able, through negotiations, to raise it up to 40 euro cent per liter, but the price again is under pressure, and this is why the dairy producers in Germany are really in a very very a bad situation, you know, because they invested a lot in their Ställe. Was heißt das denn jetzt auf Englisch? Stall. Cattle. Huh? Stable, yes. Thank you very much.
Il me semble ne pas avoir entendu parler d'un des niveaux ou d'un des moyens qu'il est possible d'utiliser, surtout dans les pays où nous sommes un très beau pays pour le fisc. Je crois qu'en français, ça se dit paradis fiscal. Hein, oui, hein, je crois qu'on peut le dire. Alors, comment dire, la non-taxation. La non-taxation de très nombreuses multinationales pose quand même un gros problème. Et en même temps, si le Luxembourg est aussi accueillant pour ces grandes entreprises, il pourrait conditionner sa détaxation au respect précisément des normes dont vous avez parlé dans plusieurs domaines. Donc j'ouvre cela comme une des pistes et je pose la question, bien sûr, à la STM. J'imagine que dans la campagne et dans les propositions, il est possible que cette dimension-là soit présente ou très présente. Donc il me semble que c'est quelque chose d'important à prendre en considération, entre autres ici au Luxembourg. Merci.
I have two remarks and two questions. Remark number one, I want to inform you and many people here in the room, I have the honor to represent ASTM within a platform here in Luxembourg, which is called Landwirtschaft. It does exist also in some way in Germany as well. And we are there together with a number of solidarity groups, North-South solidarity groups, and with organic farmers organizations and environmental organizations. And we are pushing, making a campaign to favor a faster transition towards an environmental friendly, biological agriculture. And we are about to agree on the requests to be submitted to our political parties in the next weeks in order to have them integrated in the political programs of these political parties for the elections here in Luxembourg to take place next October. One of the requests, for example, is very likely to be that we are inviting political parties to commit themselves in a future government possibly to tax soya imports. Because we know that the soya consumption coming from Latin America is heavily responsible for the deforestation and for a totally unsustainable model of agriculture. we are also fighting for new North-South relations within the European Union. Just one example, you spoke about the milk problem. And one of the results of the heavy milk production, which is continued in the European Union, there is a pressure, as you said, to export. And to export, for example, transformed milk powder. And part of the milk powder goes to poor developing countries, African countries, where the milk powder is coming on the markets under dumping conditions and killing the local producers. And that is a totally unacceptable dimension. This is true for the milk producers, it's true as well for the chicken producers and a large number of other products in the south. Now I'm coming to my two requests. When it comes to competition, we have in our European Union, in Brussels, a commissioner in charge of competition control, Madame Verstager, the Danish commissioner. And she's giving a lot of applause over the last months and years for the work she's doing, especially in terms of taxation, especially when she is condemning Apple company to pay back to the Irish government some 36 billion dollars of taxes which have not been paid and which ought to be paid. So what is your assessment as far as the work is concerned of Madame Verstager, as far as the companies are concerned, and the concentration which you have explained to us? Second and last question: how can civil society on a European basis better organize itself? What is your assessment for the civil society to organize, for example, in Brussels, through a Concord platform? Have you an idea how this Concord is functioning? Has it to be strengthened? It's a platform which is based in Brussels, in daily contact with the Commission, with the Council of Ministers, with the European Parliament. What's your assessment, and what might maybe possibly be improved in this respect? Thank you.
Thank you for the question on non-taxation. I guess we are not on a bazaar. We cannot tell someone, if you respect human and environmental rights, you may have no taxes. This is not a good deal, really. We do not want non-taxation. ASTM we are focusing on our strength. That is the information we get from our southern partners, and there we are focusing on. We are not so good in the tax or non-taxation issue. There are others who can do it, but both has to go parallelly. And if you join the Panama and the Paradise Papers with the Agri-Food Atlas, this is astonishing. And do it, it's a good lecture.
Peut-être ce sera le bon moment de dire quelque chose sur la campagne. Peut-être pour les personnes qui ne connaissent pas la campagne de l'ASTM, vous pouvez avoir quelques informations supplémentaires. Alors, cette campagne a été lancée à la fin de l'année dernière. Elle vise principalement à lancer le débat sur la responsabilité des multinationales en matière de droits humains et saumon. Dans le rapport que nous avons lancé, nous avons présenté des témoignages et des études de cas provenant de nos partenaires dans les pays du Sud qui montrent les conséquences sur les populations du Sud, notamment les violations des droits humains et les dommages à l'environnement commis par les multinationales, mais surtout à quel point c'est difficile de les rendre responsables pour ces actes. D'où l'impunité des multinationales. Plusieurs raisons sont à l'origine de ce problème. D'un côté, il y a l'absence d'instruments juridiques qui permettent de tenir les multinationales responsables de leurs actes. Grâce à des structures extrêmement complexes et opaques, elles arrivent à échapper à leurs responsabilités. Et d'un autre côté, c'est le même problème qui a été évoqué par Barbara Andussi, c'est ce pouvoir économique et politique énorme dont disposent actuellement les multinationales et qui ne cesse d'augmenter. Donc, tout comme la Fondation, nous avons essayé de tirer la sonnette d'alarme il faut responsabiliser les multinationales tant que c'est encore possible.
One of the strategies of civil society organizations more and more is to sue companies. Yeah, we call it litigation. And this is it's a strategy that means to hold a company accountable for human rights violations, for this destruction of the environment, for CO2 emissions, etc. And there are several lawyers worldwide, and there are some in Germany, and that Peruvian peasant who says we as Peruvian peasants are heavily impacted by the fact that the glaciers are going to smelt, and the glaciers are giving us water over the year, the whole year, to be able to grow our food. And the glaciers are smelting, and so in the future we are not going to have enough water because everything is going to dry up. And he didn't only sue a company doing it there, directly on the ground, but he sued a German company because the German company is to a certain extent, RWE, to a certain extent responsible for CO2 emissions. And there are, and this is something I'm not very familiar with, there is no law yet that makes sure that you can, according to the law, you can sue the company. It's new ground of legislation. What is going to happen now is to create new legislation, to use law, in order to make hold companies responsible, and even to make them ready to compensate, for the losses of that peasant, for example. It's a brand new approach. We don't know how far we go. For the big surprise was that the German court, accepted the file to prove, but there is no judgment now. But it was already, we celebrated it because it was already a success that the court accepted it, at least to look into possibilities, to hold that German company. And we really celebrated, and RWE was completely shocked, because what happens this is true for all these litigation processes worldwide, it's David against Goliath. These RWEs, Monsantos, whatsoever, they can afford to hire 20 lawyers, and come up with a lot of scrutiny and a lot of Gutachten, evidence-based, whatever. And it's the small non-governmental organization or the small peasant there in Peru who cannot afford expensive lawyers. But what is happening is that more and more organizations like ours, for example, or ASTM or others, German Watch in Germany, big environmental organization, we collect money in order to hire lawyers, to sue companies in front of the court. That's what actually takes place.
Yeah, there is a reason behind that, a certain calculation. The scientists, they can now say the emissions of certain corporations in the energy sector, they can calculate them. So what is now in heaven, there is about 0.3% coming from RWE. The biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions is Saudi Aramco. And then comes Chevron. Chevron is Texaco. We know in Luxembourg we have a dozen of Texacos. Chevron Texaco is responsible for nearly 3% of the greenhouse gas emissions which are now in heaven and which are causing worldwide. Heaven is worldwide. And so the peasants say we have not only losses in our agriculture, because in summer we do not have enough water, but they are also threatened by the burst of the glacial lakes. And he is asking RWE, so you are responsible for 0.3, more or less, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So you should pay us 0.3% of our adaptation measures of the walls we have to construct to protect us. And that is a way of calculation and and it's now juridically accepted as a case which is worth to be analyzed and sued eventually. This was a big issue at the COP in Bonn. And you can find in our Brennpunkt more cases of that. This is a rising tide, a new wave. But we also, as ASTM, we know very well that this takes a long while. We know it from our partner in Ecuador, Frente de Defensa de la Amazonía and ODAP, who have sued Chevron for polluting water and soil and rivers by oil. And they are now in the 24th year of the case. And Chevron invested $2 billion, and not only 20 lawyers, but much more, $2 billion for lawyers and for marketing firms, etc., etc. This is really David against Goliath. And it's a new way to show limits to cooperation, but you really have to have money and a long brief.
I would like to get back to some of your questions. First of all, I'm absolutely not knowledgeable and familiar with competition law. And this is true, I would say, for most of us, activists and non-governmental organizations. It's something I would say, strategic-wise, we really should look much more into detail what national competition laws and the European competition law is all about. What we do together is already to analyze that existing competition law, be it from the EU, and then the framework for the EU Commissioner on Competition, and nationally, the competition law in existence is too weak, is not sharp enough. It has no teeth anymore to really deal with these big mergers. I think we all feel powerless when we look at the power concentration of the Apples, Facebooks, and Microsofts. And we all just sitting there and saying, okay, we don't know what to do about it. Yeah? And everybody knows that they completely control the way information flow, etc., etc. Yeah, and my one of our future projects at Heinrich Perl Foundation as well is really to look what kind of reforms and fundamental changes do we need in competition law. And in Germany already an alliance of non-governmental organizations has been formed. They came up with a press release at the 9th of January. And the NGO Alliance said, we are going to make a difference in trying to reform competition law. And we will share them, and we will, as the foundation and at the headquarters in Berlin, we will invite people who have expertise, because we have to make us more knowledgeable, as we did in other areas as well. So we start now with that area of competition, to look into competition law. What do I think on tax soya imports? Our most recent meat atlas, yet only there in German, comes up with a lot of ideas how to increase the price, be it for soya or be it for other agricultural inputs in animal production, yeah, like the nitrogen, the phosphorus, that can be taxed as well. Yeah, the fertilizers can be taxed, etc. So we can have a debate on this later on. I think it's it's tricky to look what does tax means. For example, in Germany, taxes are just flowing to the overall budget. We are more looking for instruments that increase the price and help to direct, either the usage of fertilizers or to reduce, of course, soya imports. But taxes are sometimes probably not the right way. Yeah, there might be other regulations we should look into. What you asked me for, what do I think, mainly in respect, for example, to the EU Common Agricultural Policy. This reform definitely is going on. In this year, next year, the EU Commission and the Parliament has to deal with that refitting and the review of the current Common Agricultural Policy. And what we do at the foundation, together with non-governmental organizations European-wide, is not so much anymore directly do advocacy work in Brussels, but very much try to influence the political decision makers in the different countries of the European Union. Because what happens, you can try and to advocate some bureaucrats at the EU Commission, but the change will come from the member states. And this is why it's so important to create real big campaigns in most important member states. So we identified definitely, sorry, Luxembourg is not the biggest one. We identified France, Poland, Italy, Spain to be key in order to make the public more aware in those respective EU countries and really campaign and put pressure of the political decision makers in the member states to come up with a more profound and fundamental change in the EU Common Agricultural Policy. And this is going to become quite successful. And if you are more interested in that, let me know. The foundation is going to bring up an atlas as well next year that will show graphs and figures how the current EU policy favors the big farmers, and how it's impacting environment badly, and what does the export strategy of the EU mean for developing countries. That will be covered in that atlas, and we try to really come up, and this is a tricky issue strategic-wise and again resources-wise. The EU countries, the EU policy on agriculture is the biggest bunch in the budget, and I really hope that we are going to make a change. But the difficulty for making political decision makers to change means to really create a European-wide public campaign. And this is not so easy because the non-governmental organizations, the public, the parliaments, they are very much nationally oriented, and to overcome political barriers, to overcome language barriers, this is the big task ahead for us, and we have much more to come up with joint resources to make it happen, that at the same time campaigns are taking place from Bulgaria to Ireland and from Poland to Portugal. This is what we should try to achieve, and that very much would mean to put resources together. And this is because of the self-interest of many of the non-governmental organizations not so easy.
I add a question. things would be much easier if we had the farmers on our side. Why is it so difficult? For example, look at Luxembourg. You mentioned Cactus, which is our biggest supermarket. They would love to have more Luxembourgish bio products. They are very much locally focused. They are probably what you would like to have in Wiesbaden or whatever. Luxembourg is about as big as that, and we have our own national one. And they would love to have products from Luxembourg being made on a way which you would probably like. And it's so difficult to have the farmers to change. Why is that? Where do you see the problems for a campaign like the one which is made here to bring the farmers on our side? They are not many people, but still. And they are in a bad situation. They are suffering from the system.
Mm-hmm. First of all, we have Meine Landwirtschaft, a campaign in Germany as well. This Meine Landwirtschaft is formed by 100 organizations, and it's from farmers that are already on their way to produce more environmentally sound. And they heavily participate in the campaign. And Germany is probably the only country with that annual large demonstration. We just had on last Saturday a demonstration where 33,000 people participated, and it's 160 Traktoren. How do you name it? Tractors participated in it. It's flashing. It's impressive. And we have a new association of dairy farmers. Yeah, they formed their own organization because they didn't feel represented by the German peasants' roof organization. Yeah, because this classical peasants' roof organization is very traditional, very conservative, and very much more in favor for the big companies, for the big. But it's very, very difficult. If you once invested in a lot of money in big machines, if you invested in stable, holding chickens and cows, you can't get rid of it because many of these peasants are indebted. It's not only Bayer who is going to indebt itself by buying Monsanto, and then putting pressure on the politician if they fail. It's the peasant's problem as well. He invested millions in a stable or something like that, and that's a big problem. And then we have, and then this is psychologically really a difficulty. The campaigning in Germany, conventional farmers feel accused and denounced. You are saying we are murdering animals, we are poisoning people, you attack us, But we are normally those who are feeding you. Without us, you would not get your food, And this was the case after the Second World War, very much so, where the peasants were asked, please increase the food production, because people need food, in after the Second World War to restore agriculture again, and the peasants very much feel attacked. And what I can tell you is we try to do a lot to get them on board, to get them convinced. We had a full flow of last week, because we have the Green Week in Germany. That's the agricultural official fair, the global agricultural official fair in Germany. And this is why the counter demonstration and counter activity. And we at the foundation have every evening under the heading of Alternative Green Week. We have public debates like this one tonight. And there we try to invite representatives from the conventional farming organizations, and peasants are present as well, and they try to speak up. But what I would try to explain is the clever strategy is from our roof organization, the Peasants Bauernverband, der Deutsche Bauernverband, the German Peasants Roof Organization, very much trying to use psychologically that they attacked you, they denounced you, yeah. So it's becoming more and more an ideological debate. And I saw a peasant speaking up in German TV the other day, and what he brought to the public is that his son is at school is a victim of mobbing strategies. Yeah, the kid is denounced at school. Your father is a murderer. It's awful, definitely. You know, it's awful that happens. Yeah, I don't want to have this happening, yeah. But the big thing is, this is brought then to a broad public, yeah. It's much easier to get a single peasant whose kid is mobbed at school. No excuse for that. Don't misunderstand me. But this is going to become to get audience for the in front of the German TV, and those who are telling the public, look. I have evidence I can feed with my agricultural methods. The same people as conventional does, they don't get that kind of public attention. Yeah, and so it's again here a power game, and how far even the media are covering the alternatives. Yeah.
My question concerns another topic. So you were talking about the merger of Bayer Monsanto, and the European Commission is supposed to decide this beginning of March, 5th March. Do you think, as we were talking about the Peruvian case just before, do you think there is also possibilities for civil society, for citizens to have to plaint against, like in this Peruvian case? So, what impacts does glyphosate have on the fields, on our alimentation? So, what does it mean? Do you think there will also be the same possibilities as in this Peruvian case? Thanks.
I would like to add a small remark. Besides the UN treaty process for binding regulations, besides litigation on environmental and human rights, I think the aspect of the commons versus the intellectual property laws, the system of regulating who owns the land, who owns the seeds, who has access to water, and who is in charge and control of these assets, of these resources, is also a big issue. And hearing about the control of multinationals, I'm sometimes missing this debate, because I think this is something civil society has to take up also, that commons have to come back. Everything has been privatized in the last few decades, and the laws and regulations worldwide. You mentioned patents, but it's a big system of private and intellectual property rights, which is also imposing a big problem. So I would like to add that as a remark, that commons is also a big issue, I think. Thank you.
I would like to add another aspect on the issue of concentration. When one big corporation is swallowing the next big, so in order to get control about the whole production chain, from the soil to the supermarket. So the production chain is getting longer. Concentration means longer production chain. And we have, for instance, partners of us, they have problems when they sue a daughter of cooperation in their respective country, maybe they will be accepted as law case, but then they have to go up and climb up and finally to make responsible the mother. But the mother is sitting here in Finland maybe, or somewhere in the United States, and they never get finally who is responsible. Is it the daughter? Is it the mother who takes all the profit but not the responsibility? And that is the reason why we say this French law, what my colleague mentioned, which makes the mothers, cooperation mothers, responsible for what the daughters are doing elsewhere in the world. That is could be a very important law for more human and environmental right respect in Luxembourg and within Europe, where this movement for these kind of law, like French realized already, is growing, and we need public help for that. ASTM has not the power to push our government to ratify such a law, but you can help us. And we will continue with more events. And yeah, we need also public help, your help, public support.
I just would like to get back to one of your questions at the beginning. Why are there not more peasants interested in growing in a more agriculturally, environmentally sound manner? Yeah, more eco product, bio product. It very much has to do again with the political framework that is going to be set up for them. I'm not too familiar with it, but we will look at it in France. The production is increasing much faster than in Germany, for example. Austria has a very, very good track record on environmentally sound produced food, milk, even meat. Yeah? And then one has to look into what are the main reasons for it. Do they get a special support? Do they get advice? Do they get even subsidies, for example? And one of the ideas when it comes to the common European agricultural policy is mainly to use the existing subsidizing system, yeah, to support peasants and to give them the money to undergo the transition, and the transition period is very expensive, yeah, and this is why we say direct money to those who are really look into environmental services and they are dealing with a production pattern that is more environmentally sound. And this is one of our demands, for example, when it comes to, so very much so it matters. Yeah, it matters if there is a set of conditions to convince a peasant to go into the transition period. And what I learned the other days as well, when we had these public events in Germany, then people says there is, when it comes to the farmers' education, yeah, when they are becoming farmers as professionals, neither in the professional trainings nor at university is any kind of education, and the teachers are not anymore able to tell the pupils and the students something else, and as raise your productivity. You need fertilizers, and you need all kinds of classical and conventional agriculture. And people are asking, this has to be changed. We need other curricula, yeah, in order to make the education different and to show alternatives, yeah, and to bring in the ecological agricultural issue more to the universities and to schools. And so again, it has to do with the change of mindsets, very much so. Yeah, and probably my last word. I have no clue what's going to happen when the EU Commission has to decide the Monsanto-Bayer deal. There are many actors active in the area. I have no idea. I'm not part of that, because others are doing other good things, and I don't know if there is anybody or all the groups working together considering to sue. I have no idea, so I can't answer this question. But what I know, and this is something that gives me hope, that more and more activists, consumers, all people like you and us, increasing the political pressure on political decision makers. In Germany, we have a survey that says that people are ready to pay more if they know that the food is produced in a fair and equitable and sustainable way. And so the consumer has power, at least to a certain extent, to ask everywhere where he buys food, I want to know, what do I buy? So, for example, transparency, to ask for transparency, and for regulation that the product has to tell you how is this food produced, by whom and how, with genetically modified things, etc. This is something you can do as a consumer, and you can definitely buy your food at your local butcher and ask him from where do you have the meat from, or your local markets, etc. So we can do something, and we are not powerless at all, at least not when it comes to elections, for example. There you have your vote and many, many other opportunities to ask for a fundamental change in how we produce our food. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara Unmüßig. Maybe to finish, Antonia, what are the next steps of this campaign? And then we will have a drink.
Oh. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Barbara, for the brilliant presentation. So the campaign continues. Our next event is on the 5th of February. We will show the documentary That Monkeys Are No Hyenas, I think. It's about the accaparement des terres in Ethiopia, land grabbing in Ethiopia. So don't miss this event. We will continue discussing the human rights violations and environmental damages caused by the multinationals. Thank you.
Thank you.